Kia ora, tēnā koutou, no mai, haere mai. Hello everyone, welcome to the Walking the Shadowlands podcast. Join me as we take a walk into the realms of the unexplained, of the paranormal, of things that go bump in the night and haunt your dreams.
Your hosts?
I'm Marianne. Thanks so much for joining me today, tonight, whatever time it is, wherever you live in this beautiful world of ours. Sit back and relax. Let me be your guide as we walk into the Shadowlands together and see what awaits us there. Hi everyone, my guest today is a fascinating woman who has shared her knowledge of extraterrestrial encounters through her then husband and his military connections. Also, her knowledge of elementals and the deep connections within her husband's family. She opens up about the transition from traditional religious practices to embracing a more expansive understanding of spirituality. Are you willing to walk into this part of the Shadowlands and see what awaits us there? Then let's begin. Joanne Fawcett is a California native. She has an Associate of Arts degree in film production and accounting. She is the mother of a successful grown daughter and is the proud grandmother of 3. She enjoys reading, needlework, walking, travel and spending time with the family. She is owned by her sibling cats Winston and Princess Charlotte. Joanne never aspired to be a writer. In the late 90s, she published a community newspaper, writing articles about interesting places to visit and environmental issues. Years later, while speaking at a super soldier conference about her former husband's military experiences, an attendee asked her when her next story was coming out, not her husband's next story, her story. Several years later, Joanne finally put her story on paper. Midlife Magic is Joanne's first book. The Prince Was Wrong, Leaving the Narcissist Behind, is Joanne's second book. I'd like to welcome my special guest today, Joanne Fawcett. I've been looking forward to talking with Joanne. She has a very interesting background and I'm excited to explore whatever comes up in our conversation today. So welcome, Joanne.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself, Joanne, and we can just take it from there, really.
All right. I live in Portland, Oregon. I used to live in California, but I've lived in several states around the United States. I just turned 70 a couple weeks ago. I have a grown daughter and 3 grandchildren who are 16 to 21, and they all live in the area, so that's really nice. I don't see them every day or anything like that, but I see them often enough. We have regular family things. I am a bookkeeper by trade. I've been a bookkeeper for over 40 years. I've been married 7 times. I've seen UFOs. I've seen ghosts. I've seen fairies. I'm a witch. I'm working on my third book. I've already published 2 books.
Yeah, I saw that. And I always generally like to read my guest's book or books if I can before I have them on so I can have a informed conversation. But unfortunately, I never got the opportunity to read yours. Your 2 books are called Midlife Magic and The Prince is Wrong, Leaving the Narcissist Behind. We're not going to pay too much attention to the second book because that's not the area that we go into in this podcast. The area that I generally cover in this podcast is spirituality, UFOs, unexplained, paranormal, things that make people think and question what reality is.
I love all that.
I had a feeling you might. How did you go from being a deeply religious woman to
not
Wiccan? Yeah, that's a big leap.
It is. And I don't say that I'm Wiccan per se. I just like to say I embrace more the British Celtic craft.
Right.
But when I met husband number 7, I had to make a decision. Do I want to sit in church all day and go do church service many nights a week? Or do I want to sit and listen and get to know this fascinating person?
Sure.
And we started talking about topics that I would never talk about at church. And my whole life was just, there's cool stuff beyond the church.
Right.
So I never had a traumatic problem with the church. I just all of a sudden did not need it anymore. And I just started visiting him more and more. And then our relationship kept going and things like that. So he opened my eyes to spirituality versus religiousness.
Right.
And just so many possibilities of things to think about and believe in and know about the vast universe. And then later, and he started mentioning the craft, and many of his partners, his female partners throughout his life are witches. And it's like his daughters are witches. Okay, I think I'd like to learn more. And then I went on a business errand for a new client, and the bookkeeper I was replacing, she's a witch who I've taken several classes from since, but it's like I walked into her house and she has a little flyer and it's talking about like the elements of magic class. And I go, I think that looks interesting. She goes, you smell like you have the smell. I go, what does a witch smell like? But she just knew that was in me before I even really knew it. And I'm starting to learn that there's some magical things that have been passed or were practiced in my lineage and traditions that they had that related to woo-woo stuff regarding women is, I don't come by this just by happenstance. So it's come out and it's very, and now I'm finding that my daughter has some very similar gifts that she's finally starting to be vocal about. We don't practice the same way. She doesn't call herself a witch, even though her fiance calls her a witch, but it's all in good humor because she's very spiritually inclined that way. And she's very intuitive. It's, this is a family trait. I love this.
And very often it is passed down from generation to generation.
Yeah. So it wasn't taught to me, but the knowing it was always in me. I just didn't know it. It's nothing my grandmothers would, okay, and you're all witches, dear. They didn't say anything like that.
Because they probably wouldn't have used that term anyway. Wise woman, healers.
Right. And it's like one of them, either my mom or my grandma was talking. We had a tradition in our family when the girl had her first menstrual cycle, we would have this little ritual that we would take her in the woods and do that. And I'm going, my mom never did that for me. And she was saying either my mom was telling me this or her mom, but that had been passed down and done for my mom. I think, you didn't do that for me.
Right.
But it was just so cool to think that, there are traditions that came down through my lineage that how cool that is. And I didn't even know it was a thing, what they did. And I was like, this is really cool. So I do come by it naturally, apparently.
Yeah.
The one thing I do, and it makes sense because like my family, we were all into Boy and Girl Scouts and stuff. So in my family, we always did camping because it was the only vacation we could afford. But again, my parents taught me this love of nature. So both ways that just came to me naturally. And I love being out in nature. And I have been able to share that with my grandkids, especially when they were little. We don't get to do as much of it now, but it's so lovely to be able to share that love of nature and the world around you with your kids.
Oh, it's beautiful. And really, that's what the Celtic practices are about. I really don't like the term Wiccan because it's a new term. But yeah, that's what those natural practices are all about. It's about being in touch with nature, natural laws, nothing against nature, totally working in balance with the energies.
And my daughter, she's a lactation consultant, but she's also a master herbalist. And she uses that in her lactation practice. And most of my medicine is through her herbal practice. But I used a few herbs when she was young, but I didn't have a million herbs around me. So it's like maybe she came by some of that naturally, but then she just naturally went that way and used it in her practice, because she could have chosen just to use a lot of Western medicine with her clients, but she doesn't. She uses herbs and things with them. And so it's so wonderful that she's chosen that. And most of her kids some of them have to use Western medicine, but they've grown up on herbal medicine, and that's done most of them just fine for most of their lives. Some of them have health issues that now need Western medicine, but sometimes I do too.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Ghosts or UFOs?
First of all, I'll actually tell you where I come from the point of perspective of UFOs. I've been an experiencer since I was 3 years old.
Wow.
Had face-to-face interaction with star people. So I know they exist. There's not a doubt in my mind. And I've talked openly about experiences that I've had on my podcast and on podcasts where I've been a guest. And that's where I come from. So you'll not find any skepticism from me as far as that. Let's start with that.
Okay, sure.
Now, the thing that caught my eye specifically was the word super soldier. And
I am not a super soldier.
No.
Some people have called my ex-husband a super soldier, like one of the early ones, not necessarily the same experiences as super soldiers that are now out on the conference circuits and what have you. But I grew up, if we're the same age, we grew up in the 50s, 60s, watching Martian movies and all that. Okay, that's great entertainment, but okay, that's not part of my world. And when I met husband number 7, I learned that his and his dad's experience in the military was all about dealing with the military side of UFOs and non-humans here on this planet and out in space. They were part of a military program that regularly, they had spacecraft that went out in space, did missions, fought aliens, all that good stuff. So I learned more of the science part of it and about space science and about the reality of there being non-humans. And some are scary, some are not, some are really cool. I love to talk about the really cool ones. And I can talk about negative stuff as well. But it just opened my eyes, because coming from a Christian background, even though all the major church leaders know all this stuff is going on, they don't talk about it over the pulpit. So I was fascinated to learn that the Vatican knows all about aliens, and they're collecting debris from fallen stuff, and they put it in the Vatican archives. And the Mormon leaders would help the military deal with alien stuff. So it's pretty cool. But of course, whatever, you want all the help you can get. And I've had my own UFO sightings. I've seen like drone craft. I've seen craft that are following me and saying hello, because who's inside is friends of my ex-husband, and they were keeping an eye on me. And the ex-husband is in prison. So one of the times I was visiting him, we're outside on the patio for one of our overnight visits. And there was this huge triangular craft that came right over where we were staying, because they wanted me to see it. He knew who was flying it. Even though there's an Air Force base right near that prison, it wasn't ours. And because our triangular craft can't go that slow and can't go that low. And this was only like about 1,000 or so feet above us, but it was slow. I could see the shape. I could see the lights. I could hear the whoop, 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 whoop of the engine or whatever, the propulsion system. And it was amazing. I was like, okay, that was the best 65th birthday present I've ever had. That was cool. But I didn't doubt that this, and especially because I had my own sightings throughout the years after I met him, I had no doubt believing the stuff he was telling me. And it made perfect sense. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you talk? I've seen what I've learned that are drone craft following me around from friendly aliens. I've seen sightings that look like a shooting star, but it was like, that's slower than a shooting star. And I was in a big group. We were having a sky watch, and I've seen alien craft. When people are using night vision goggles, they often attach it to a video camera so we can see things. So that was great. I've seen it that way. I've seen it through my night vision goggles, wearing them. And one time, like I said, my ex-husband, who had all this military experience with aliens and UFOs and who started teaching me, he couldn't tell me everything, but he told me a lot. And what he could tell me. And he's dealt with aliens on and off the planet. The military has their own spacecraft where they have battles and go exploring or go off to treaty conferences, things like there's lots of things. And obviously he couldn't tell me a lot of it, but there's also used to be an international intelligence agency. So whenever there was threats or concerns affecting the planet, lots of governments and militaries would get together and work together. And at first, when it was formed in the 40s, Admiral Nimitz was in charge. And then when he died, my ex-father-in-law became in charge. I was told a lot, and because that wasn't U.S. military, then he could tell me more than he couldn't tell me stuff about his U.S. military involvement. But I learned about spacecraft, and I learned about the science of space. And I haven't learned about hundreds of types of species, but I've learned about many species. Lots of them are friendly. Lots of them are not friendly. Some originated on this planet. Many more originated off planet. Some come here to try and invade us or to take over, or they want to take over. There have been several attempts, especially, I don't know what's happening now, but especially in the 70s, maybe early 80s, but especially in the 70s, there were a lot of invasion attempts. And that was when my ex-husband was at his busiest time because he was young and that was before prison. So I'm sure more was happening after he went to prison. He wasn't involved. So lots of stuff. I remember driving one time from Northern California to like the Sacramento area when I was going to visit him at the prison. And I don't know, it was 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning because it was a 2-hour drive. And I'm driving along this 2-lane highway, and all of a sudden there's this bright light in the sky that's too low for a star. But then it would go dark, and then it would go light again. And so it was like cloaking. And it's like, okay, honey, I think your friends were saying hello to me when I was driving here. He goes, yeah, probably. And another time I was in Phoenix visiting some friends. And we would go walking at night. And I'd met them at a UFO conference or something. And so we'd go walking at night. And one neighborhood was too suburban. So there were too many lights. So we didn't see anything. And one of the things he used to tell me was, remember to look up. And the next night we took a different route, fewer street lights and things. And we're looking up. We're just chatting. 3 women were chatting and walking. And there's this star just blinking at us. I'm going, ladies, do you see that? I don't think that's a star. They're going, no, I don't think so either. And again, it was his friends in their spacecraft saying, hello, I'm here. We're just watching out for you. I felt like they were trying to say hello, trying to let me know they were around. They couldn't really just land and say, hi, this is who we are type of thing. There's treaties against that. But I was also felt very protected because they always seemed to be around, especially when I'd go to England to speak. They were always protecting and hovering and at least sending drone craft out to watch out for me. And I did feel very protected. So that was really nice. Oh, the other one, the biggest sighting I ever had was when I turned 65. And I was back at the prison. We were having like an overnight visit. And he had just gone out to the outer patio door to be counted by the guards. And he said, oh, come on out here. And it's about 9:30 at night. And all of a sudden I'm looking up and there's the biggest triangular craft just flying slowly over our patio. And there was like a wide mesh, but like hard mesh wire top over the patio. So it wasn't like totally open sky or anything. But anyway, we could see through it and we could see the stars in the sky and everything. That was pretty cool. So then there's this giant triangular craft. I couldn't see a lot of it, but I could tell it was triangular. It had red lights and it was going, whoop. And, okay, this is pretty cool. That's not one of ours. And he goes, no. And I'm going, okay, those are your friends. And he goes, yes. And so I wanted to say hello and wanted to prove that this is who they are. So that was really exciting. And then it came back and did it one more time just so I'd be sure to see it. So that was my present for turning 65. And it was our wedding anniversary at the time, too. So that was a really lovely gift. Have I seen anything since? No. But he and I things started falling apart after that. And so no more family, no more overnight visits, and no more close-up encounters. But I have my proof. Have I ever seen an alien? No. Do I believe that they're real? Yes. Have I been abducted? Not that I know of. But I know that happens. I've talked to enough people that have talked about their experiences. I totally believe. And even as a Mormon, you read the Mormon scriptures that say God created all these worlds out there. So, okay, then they must be inhabited, and they're not all human out there. Not that the scriptures are going to say that, because they want you to think they all look like the Christian God, but they don't. It depends on what kind of planet or world you live on, determines what kind of body you are. You might just be a blob of gas. You might be a whale. You might be a cat or a dog or some kind of insect. There's many kinds of reptilians. Some originated on this planet. Some originated on space. Some are friendly. Most of them are not. But there's a very friendly reptilian species that I still talk about them a lot. They're like the velociraptors from Jurassic World. And they originated on this planet. They left the planet millions of years ago to colonize space. They have a vast empire in space run by a female, which I love. And they've come back here. They have bases here. They're great. They have families. They love art. They love education. They love science. They don't like to develop their own technology. They like to borrow a lot of technology, but they're really smart and they're funny and they're quirky. And what can I say? I would love to meet one. They look scary, but they can be, and they used to eat us regularly, but they don't anymore. Their empress in the 50s decided, oh, it's a good idea for us to become good friends with, or friends with the humans, especially those ones in the United States, because they've been our ally since the early 50s.
Okay, I will say on the Triangle UFO, I've actually seen one of those. I was driving to Auckland from Hamilton in New Zealand, which is about 2 hours north of where I lived. And I had my 2 daughters in the car who were teenagers at that stage. And it was nighttime. I was taking up some jewelry. I had some sterling silver jewelry I had created for my niece's wedding, a tiara and a necklace and stuff like
nice.
that. Oh, yeah, it was really lovely. And we were just going up. It was about maybe 6 or 7 at night, and it was just starting to get dark. And like you, I saw this light, really low, orangey coloured light that just kept getting dim, and then it got brighter, and it just was coming towards us. And I was driving, I was thinking, that's not a plane, because it was semi on the plane route. That's not a plane. Then it came closer, and it went to the left a little bit, and I could see that it was a triangular UFO. Again, it was only about 1,000 feet above us. And then I stopped the car and got out, and it came and changed direction from the right of me, sorry, not the left of me, from the right of me, across the road to the side where I was on, and we drive on the left-hand side here in New Zealand. So it came across to where I was, flew right across us, dead silent, didn't make a sound. Not a sound. I could see all the lights. My daughters were terrified. I was just like, oh, okay, I wonder who you belong to. And then it just took off.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. One of the times, and I do acknowledge that human militaries do have triangular crafts.
They do.
But they usually can't go that slow so that you could actually see them. So there was another time, one of the times I was in England, I've spoken at several conferences there, but we were visiting the lady that was kind enough to drive me from conference to conference. We stopped in Glastonbury to stay with her friend, and she wanted to show me the tour and look for fairies, and that was all really cool. We were out one night in the woods on this ridge looking for fairies, and all of a sudden the stars are starting to come out, and this one just goes horizontal and then vertical. Okay, guys, that's not a star. And clearly the stars don't move like that. And again, it was a drone craft, my ex-husband's friends, and just keeping an eye on us, because that same drone craft had been like the night before when we had stayed, or a couple nights before when we had stayed a little bit farther north in Cheshire at a hotel out in nowhere, but in the country. And we were looking up, and she was always taking pictures with her camera. And she goes, what do you think that black spot is? I go, I don't know, but it's probably somebody following us. And it was the same craft the next night, or whenever it was, a couple days later, because I think then we went to a conference and then we went to Glastonbury. But it just, I love the fact that they wanted to be around and protect me. I thought that was pretty cool.
That is pretty cool to have that experience. How much can you trust your ex-husband's knowledge?
I get a lot of that now.
I thought,
I've seen military paperwork, so I know he was in the military. A lot of people doubt me, but I believe it, and I've seen the paperwork. I've had other veterans organization leaders that have verified his military experience. That's all good. And I've seen certain orders and things top secret. And I know the same thing for his dad. They're all top secret, but I've seen him assigned to certain things that were space program related, or at
right.
least they were at one time, and now maybe they're not classified anymore. But so I do have proof that he was assigned to some weird stuff. There's many things I learned that he did lie to me about, but his military experience, I'm absolutely certain that he did not. And I've talked to his dead dad, who verifies they were all in the military. So,
I wasn't questioning that at all.
Yeah.
What I was questioning was his understanding of, here's my knowing. I'll tell you my knowing.
Okay.
So my star people told me that your government made an agreement with a group of aliens many years ago. But those aliens actually didn't have the best interests of humanity at heart.
Probably not.
They were out for themselves, pretty much. And
Probably.
so, yeah, there's a lot to it. It's very political. I have no doubt that your husband's had his experiences, and I actually spoke to a super soldier a few seasons ago, because this will be my 14th season. And I spoke to a lady a few seasons ago, and she gave me great detail about how they work and how they were injected with this black gooey stuff, and and how they had this program with, I think they call it 4 and 20 or something, where they can take
20
and back. That's it. Yeah.
20 back. He was never part of that. And I would say he was a super soldier in the fact that he had very elite military training. Everything I've heard from the super soldiers at different conferences, his experience was not that.
Yeah.
He went into the military in the early 70s, and he'd been around the military his whole life, but his training is elite military training. Do I know everything that he went through? No. But it's interesting because, yes, I do know that there were early meetings with different alien groups, and probably it didn't always work out. A lot treaties were broken all the time. I do know that in 1961, there was an interstellar treaty conference in southern England, and at least 100 species of aliens were there. Some came by spacecraft, some came through portals, some came out of the oceans, many different kinds, and lots of world leaders, political leaders, state leaders, royalty, all came, and President Kennedy and the British Prime Minister and Lyndon B. Johnson was there as the vice president. You had a lot of military leaders. My father-in-law was in charge of security, and my ex was there as a little kid. He and his little British girlfriend were allowed to hang out and play with some of the alien children whose parents were there as delegates, but they had different meetings and came to many agreements and created a big treaty. And I don't know that all of it's in place anymore, but the one that banned civilian communication is still in place. And, but do we let the humans go out into space? Do we sell them our used spacecraft? How many humans are we allowed to kidnap? Do we allow them to defend their planet? Lots of different logistical things. And what was fascinating to me was just to hear about the different species and to hear about the different logistical preparations for such a meeting. As those aliens can't stay at the same castle as this group because they hate each other. These need to have special tanks built for them because they're coming out of the ocean, and all this interesting stuff was, and my ex wrote a huge report about that. So that was fascinating. 10 years later, when he was a young adult, there was another conference like that in Iran under the guise of the Shah of Iran throwing this huge party to celebrate like the 2,500-year anniversary of the monarchy. And so while there's pictures online, big party and stuff, but over here, maybe underground, somewhere else in another tent or whatever, they were having more treaty conferences and continued discussion. And now you had a couple hundred species coming because species had heard about the first one. And by then my ex was also working security and stuff. So it's fascinating to hear what I'm very interested in, what the different species are like. And now I pull into it, kind of like you, the spiritual side of it, because many of them are very spiritual. And with my knowledge of my magical practice and some of their spiritual beliefs. And again, I'm of the mindset that we're all connected, whether we look at, obviously we don't all look the same, but we're all connected. So I want to focus on that. And many of them want to communicate with us and connect with us. How do we elevate ourselves to be on their plane? Because number one, they're older than we are, so they've more evolved than we are. And they're probably way more spiritual than a lot of us. And a lot of them practice magic. A lot of them have fairies. So that's part of my world. So this is really cool. And one of my spirit guides is a raptor sorceress. It's just part of my world.
I was going to say the reptilian species never lost their connection with the elementals at all. Throughout the eons, they've retained their connection with the elementals.
Yeah.
And they tend to live.
I love hearing that you might live on this other planet and you've got elementals and you bring them here with you when you come for a conference, and the elementals help translate for each other. But how cool. We're not the only ones who have elementals. Isn't that wonderful? That's another way that we're similar. And they probably love their planet just as much as our elementals love our planet. And I firmly believe that maybe not all lines of witchcraft, but certainly the British witches. And again, witchcraft to me is science, and we got the science from somewhere. And they might have been taught that witches are known for communicating with aliens, and they could have gotten a lot of their information from them. But again, it's just different ways to use natural law. So why not talk to people who've been using those laws for a long time?
Yeah, it is natural law. I 100% agree. But that started back in the Lemurian days.
Yes. And I do believe that one of my past lives, I don't know whether it was Atlantis or Lemurian, but I lean towards Lemurian. I love learning more about them. And yeah, I just think that's pretty cool. And it's the energy part of it is just so fascinating to me. Yeah. I don't know much about that past life of mine, but I do, when I see movies or something about it, I do resonate with it. And I've also had a reading once, a couple of friends of mine. One is really, she goes to conferences and will help people find out which star family they're from. She's got a little grid thing she uses in a pendulum. And then together, she and this other psychic friend, they developed a set of oracle cards that have aliens on them and different things. I'd love to just sit around and chat with some non-humans and interact. And that just doesn't scare me. Now, if you want to eat me, sure, I'm not going to want to do that. But I would just love to sit and chat and have tea. And let's just talk about what our families are like, or what we do here and what you do there.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. I know one thing that my star people have consistently said to me, that, and they find it really amusing, is that how humans have to compartmentalize everything and put it in boxes and label it. Like you're angry, you're sad, you're a separate, not an overall holistic thing. And we have to constantly label and put in boxes so we can process it in our way of thinking.
Interesting. I have, and I always forget to pull this out when I'm doing a podcast, so forgive me, but I have a wonderful quote that a Raptor senator gave at the 1971 conference. And he was 300 years old at the time, and he's still alive, at least as of a year or so ago when I was last speaking to my ex. But it just moves me to tears most times I read it. But it was all about how the universe, the whole universe that we're a part of, is like just amazing and abundant and vast. And even if you don't have eyes or ears and you don't look alike, everything is different, but we're all part of this amazing universe, and there's an abundance of enough things to provide for us all, but also we're just all uniquely wonderful and infinitely wonderful. And you might look like this and I might think, but that creature is just as amazing as I am. And they might be looking at me like going, ew. But maybe that creature can't even see me, and all they can do is touch my face and go, yeah, not like us. But it reminds us that everything in the universe is connected. And so why don't we treat each other better? And it's very touching to me to have somebody from another place that doesn't look like me at all, doesn't look like any of us here, have such a wise outlook on life and the universe and this connection. We're all connected.
I remember seeing a reptilian once. I woke up one night to a bright light in my hallway to my left, and I looked up, and around my bed were a whole group of different sorts of beings.
Oh, wow.
And my son actually had an experience that night as well, which kind of verified to me that this was real. You always question if that's the human thing. Anyway, I looked towards the door and I saw this reptilian being standing there. And all I could see was this sharp teeth, and he terrified me. My first thought was, oh my God, he's going to eat me. He's going to eat me, because all I could see was the teeth and this scary looking face. And the other beings kept saying, no, Marianne, you're safe. He's okay. You don't have anything to worry about. He's one of us. He's with us. He's safe. And once I got over my initial human fear of seeing something so different to what I was used to seeing, by that stage I'd seen multiple different types of beings. I'd seen beings that were feline in appearance. I'd seen all sorts.
Nice.
And he was the most loving, wise, kind being. He was just absolutely beautiful. His appearance terrified me, but once I got over that, he was so loving and kind. And so I always get upset when people always tar species, like all reptilians are bad, or all greys are bad, or whatever. And that's just...
And they're not.
They're not. It's like humans.
Exactly. And yes, there are some grays that work with some negative, less friendly species. There are some grays who work with us and they're very friendly. There's some reptilians, especially the ones out in space, who are awful and work with governments that are wanting to take over and doing a lot of invading and causing a lot of wars and terrorism and stuff. But they're not the reptilians that I know about.
I see where you're coming from. I totally see where you're coming from when you say that, but it's my understanding and my knowing that your government is as involved in that as any other government, as far as the fighting and everything goes.
Yeah, my government is far less than perfect.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
And different governments work with different alien, depends on what the agenda is and who's in charge at the moment. And the military's not always thinking the same way that the president's thinking. So
the president's only a figurehead. Presidents come and go. They don't control the reality. There's a shadow government that does all that. And my star people told me back in the 80s that your government had been told that they had to release the information of other extraterrestrial beings and humanity's place in the greater scheme of things by they were given a time frame, and they were told that if this didn't occur, then the choice would be taken out of their hands. That's what I was told back in the 80s. But they said that a certain portion of humanity had to reach an awakening stage. By awakening, they mean questioning the information they're fed, questioning the religious constraints, questioning everything, and that happened maybe 4 years ago. And since then, I've noticed that your government has been, instead of dripping, there's been a almost constant feed of information about different UFOs, like the TikTok videos, the government hearings, blah blah blah. So yeah, the time is running out.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because again, my ex would say, especially back in the 70s, they knew where a lot of aliens where they actually lived. Were they going to tell the public? No. But now telescopes and technology has speeded up so much that they're afraid we're going to see them. But there's so much that the military's already known for so long. And it's, okay, could you catch up? Because a lot of us already believe this is real. And so you need to just start spilling the beans. But especially, I used to go to several UFO conferences, and it's so delightful to be among a group of people that actually believe what you believe instead of relying on what the government's telling you anyway. Okay, so here's the grassroots efforts to try and get this information out to the world. And I loved that, being around like-minded people. I wasn't going to wait for the government.
Yeah.
I did my small part.
Yeah, and good for you. So that was your UFO night. Did he talk about the different species that he's encountered, or what sort of?
My ex?
Mm.
Yeah. Over the years, we were together 25 years. And he didn't tell me about this stuff right at the beginning, but once he did, he was slowly giving me information. And especially when he wrote about the conferences and things, he could describe different aliens. And so, yes, there's several that I speak about and give descriptions of. We were going to work together and do more of that and put out another report that was almost like this little dictionary or encyclopedia. That never happened, but he's compiled a lot of that information, but it's just sitting there. And I no longer do my nonprofit that was parsing out this information. But I did learn about a few different cat species and a really cool hound dog species that are merchants. And the cats are scientists and things, and more than one reptilian species. And let's see what else, some insect species and some oceanic species, couple different kinds. I love, if you ever saw the movie Abyss, there's a species that looks like that with its glowing lights inside. Is that they're beautiful. But the stuff we see in movies is often real. And that's just a great way to teach us about this stuff. And I loved the movie. It wasn't an adventure film, but it was, and I can't even remember what it was called, but it was like 12 pods hovered around 12 different cities around the world. And inside was like a water, some kind of creature that was in like a tank of liquid. And it was trying to communicate with some linguists. Remember that movie?
I know that one. And they use these sort of smoke signals.
Yeah, and they put it on the windows, and the
Yes.
lady linguist, and so she was trying to figure out his language. And I love that movie because here's reality, folks. It's not all Indiana Jones adventures type stuff. Some of it just is right out of Star Trek and Star Wars and all that. But some of it is you can learn how to communicate with each other. We don't need to fight each other. They just want to communicate with us. And even though that movie, it wasn't boring to me, but I'm sure it was boring to a lot of people who saw it. But I loved it. But again, that's what we should be working towards, is how do we get along? How do we tell each other what we're like? And he'd never really told me about that kind of species. There are hundreds of species out there. There's so many wonderful species out there. Okay, they're not all friendly, but they're all these amazing different creatures, and we can learn so much from them.
Oh, yes.
Just appreciate our differences and similarities. The raptors, they're very family oriented and just all kinds of cool little weird oddities that I know.
Very family oriented. The lineage thing is quite important, was quite important to that species anyway. Yeah, very interesting. I always have been fascinated by different cultures, but here's the thing. Humans can barely get along with each other.
We have a problem with that.
Yeah, we do have a slight problem with that. But that's the nature of this reality we currently live in, because we've lost our contact with nature. And that's where the elementals come in.
True.
And for my listeners who aren't aware, we've talked about elementals a bit. They're the beings like the fairies, the sprites, brownies, elves, gnomes. I guess there's 101 different species of elementals.
Yeah, where I lived in California, one of the nice things is the ex grew up around elementals, and his father had elementals and he had elementals. So when I moved into the house, he actually drew me a map and said, okay, here's where the ones outside live. Here's their names.
Wow.
Okay, you need to put houses or beds for these ones. Here's the ones that live inside. Here's their names. This one's a brownie. This one's a sprite, blah, blah, blah. This one's a fairy. And some of the names I can't pronounce, but I shouldn't say religiously, but I was very good about making beds and buying things at the garden shop for outside houses and things like that. And I put out treats. I used to do it like many times a month, and it got to the point where I would just do it like for the new moon, the full moon, the quarter moon, things like that, and special holidays, Christmas and Halloween and all the big human holidays. They love treats, so lots of sweets. And so I had no problem sharing my sweets with them. And every now and then they'd get a little meat or wine, but usually it was just food. And sometimes it was bread and water. And there was always water in the garden. Sometimes it was because I was also feeding the squirrels and the deer and everything else that came into the garden. But I know there's here, it's first for the fairies, and then everybody else gets to share when the fairies are done. But there was seeds and peanuts and a variety of things that I kept out in the garden. So everybody was happy, and the deer came to have their babies in the yard, and
Oh,
it was
wow.
lovely. And the ex was really good, especially in the last few years we were together. Once he was able to do hobby things again, he was building these lovely little fairy rooms and fairy bedrooms and small houses. And he built some pretty elaborate fairy houses, which I didn't get to keep, but he sent me some little bedrooms and things like that. And I have a couple here at my house here, but he was really good and he put a lot of detail in it. So because the fairies need to be honored, or the elementals, they all need to be honored. And I could sometimes see them. I couldn't hear them. They wanted to talk to me so bad, but I couldn't hear them. He could communicate with them. So sometimes he would have to relay a message to me later saying, so-and-so said this, you need to do this. And sometimes when I would do something to upset one of them, it's like, okay, now you're pushing me down the stairs or pushing me as I'm going up the stairs, or, okay, my keys are missing. Please help me find my keys. And you get very, okay, I'm sorry I did that. Or thank you. I know you're laughing at me and I'm a silly human. Please help me find the keys. Or I really need this piece of paper and I've looked through this pile 5 times. And finally, the piece of paper is peeking out at me from the pile. Or finally, the keys are just, okay, I know they were not there 5 minutes ago,
Right.
but they also want us to honor the planet. And especially, and as do the aliens or the non-humans that originated on this planet. The raptors love this planet, even though most of them are not here anymore, but this is their mother world. This is my mother world. This is the elementals that are from here. This is their mother world. Why are we not taking better care of it? When I try to walk in my area every day, and I used to just walk for exercise, and now it's more meditation because I'm hugging trees. I'm talking to everything that's the plants and the animals and everybody's dog and everybody's cat. And, oh, the flowers, you're so pretty today. And if I'm in the woods, I will stand there and touch a tree. Nature's huge to me, and it really speaks to my soul. It's just part of who I am and part of what I need people to know.
100%. I had a guest on my show several times who's quite well known in New Zealand. And he has this instrument that he attaches to plants and it creates music from the plants. Yeah, it's so amazing. But he taught me something and I've done it ever since. And that's, if you're going to go on a bushwalk, we call it bush in New Zealand, or forest or hike or whatever you call it over there, choose the tree that seems like the guardian tree to you and touch it and introduce yourself. Say, hi, I'm Marianne and I'm just coming to enjoy your beauty. And you just introduce yourself. And I've done that ever since. And I've found that the times that I do that, I have a much more profound experience in my walk in nature than I do normally, because they pass the information on. Trees communicate.
Because the trees are all connected.
Yeah.
Do you do that with a different tree every time?
It depends where I'm going.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. And like, I'm not in New Zealand now. Currently, I live in Australia, but yeah, there was a area outside of Napier called White Pine Bush. And I used to go there all the time, and I would just go to this one tree and say, oh, back again.
Nice. Yeah, and right near me, we have a park called Forest Park because it's part of a forest.
Yeah.
And there's lots of different trails and things. And I've been on, there's a lower part and there's a higher part. And in the higher part, it's just you're walking through the redwoods and it's a forest, it's a fire road. So it's really easy to walk. The other one is a narrow trail. Lots of people go on, but it's just lovely. 6 blocks from my house and I'm in a forest.
Oh, how wonderful.
It is amazing. It's so amazing. And so right after a rain, you go and there's all of a sudden new little waterfalls and the birds are going crazy. And it's just amazing to see the water gushing. And, oh, there's a waterfall that wasn't there a couple weeks ago because now we've just had this huge storm and things like that. But I just love going there all different times of the year. I'll go. If it's super muddy, I'm not going to go, but I'll go and just walk around some of the mud, or I will go many times of the year, except when it's icy.
Yeah.
But it's really nice to go and experience the different seasons and things like that. So,
yeah, it's really healing for the soul, isn't it?
It is. And we need that.
Yeah, we do. My ideal place to live would be having the forest or the bush behind me and the sea in front of me. Oh, it's my ideal.
You and I are best friends now.
Because we're lucky here in New Zealand more than Australia. You have that all around New Zealand because they're two islands. You're never far from the sea, and it's not like in Australia where you have to live on the coast to be near the sea, otherwise.
True.
All the states, the distances when I lived there were so vast, it was hard for me to get my head around them. Yeah.
And the Pacific Northwest is a bit like that because you've got lots of forests and the ocean is not that far away. I still want to get up to there's a Northwest Washington, there's the Olympic, I don't know if it's a national park, but the Olympic Peninsula.
Right.
And it's this like foresty, canyony, there's a rainforest in there as well. I have to go there. I haven't been there yet. It's one of my bucket list things. And it's a few hours away, but I still haven't gone there.
Oh, it sounds so beautiful.
I know.
Do you still have a lot of connection with your elementals?
It's funny because I practice my life as if I do, and I'm hoping that a couple of them came with me or some new ones have found me. I've got 2 little fairy houses or bedrooms here in my apartment. I do put treats out for them regularly, like I said, especially on the new and the full moon. I'm pretty good about doing that, and the holidays and stuff like that. So I act as if they are here. I don't see them necessarily like I used to see them as much, but I do still pay honor to them and talk to them and act like they're here. And I'm sure sometimes my cat acts like somebody's running around making him go nuts.
Mind you, cats see spirit. That could be another reason.
My cat will see spirits as well. Yeah. There was one apartment when I first moved to Portland, and I know the ghosts were peeking down through the attic because I was on the 3rd floor. The cats were all just looking up all the time. But yeah, so I act as if they are here, and they haven't played a lot of tricks on me. So I think they know my life is more in tune with their rhythm and stuff. We're getting along really well, whether I see them or not.
In many different cultures, in New Zealand as well, with the Māori culture, you don't have elementals in the home. I spoke to an Irish gentleman who had an elemental fort on his farm, and he says, no, do not ever invite them into your home, ever. And in New Zealand, the Sei folk, there's 2 types. There's the Patipaerehe, which are land-based, and there's the Ponaturi, which are sea-based elementals.
Oh, wow.
But they are human-sized.
Right.
And very often they have red hair.
Oh, wow. Cool. It's interesting because, again, when I moved into the ex's house, he would say, okay, there's definitely ones, and there were garden elementals, and the garden is ruled by this one. And you have house elementals, and the house is ruled by this one. And so for a while, I was putting treats in the house for the house ones and outside for the garden ones. But eventually, I think the house ones went outside and joined the garden ones. But yeah, that we had them in both places. Yeah. And one of my friends, she lives in England, and she has lovely watercolor paintings. And she did the cover for my midlife magic book. So she threw in some fairies for me. And she just did a painting of some undines, and they're very human size, and they're coming up out of the water. I don't know if they had tails like mermaids, but they're obviously water folk.
Right.
But like you said, they look very human size. Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, like humans, they come in all sizes and shapes and
Exactly.
varieties. It's just a part and parcel of this reality that we live in. But there are so many more layers than what we see. As one of my star people said to me once, there are many more realities than the one you're currently known of, Marianne.
Yes, yes, there are. And sometimes the elementals, if you do see them in their corporeal form, they're going to show up the way you want to see them.
Yeah.
Because then if people have ever seen Brian Froud's artwork, some of them look like a pile of sticks, and some of them look this way, and some of them look this way. And even like the non-human that's an oceanic species, the nereids, they can take on a shape. If you want to see a mermaid when you're out to sea, they'll look like a mermaid. If you want to see this, that's what they'll look like. And there are aliens that they actually do look like dolphins, but there are some species that will just look like what you want to see. They'll fulfill your fantasy.
Which says that they're telepathic.
Yes, yes. And the ones, I've seen a couple in corporeal form. One time I was just watering the yard at the California house, and one of them must have been resting on a flower because all of a sudden this little thing with human legs was flying off. It's like, I don't think that's a butterfly. And another time, not too long before I moved to where I was working, my office was in the lower level of the house, and I have security cameras on each door. And usually the security camera would see different things flitting about in the upper garden. And it was usually the elementals flitting about. I'm sure there were moths too, but I like to believe it was the elementals most of the time. But anyway, one time I was working here at my desk and I happened to look at the camera and it's, oh, that one's changing shape from its energy form to a little person. Okay, I've got to run upstairs and say hello. By then it had disappeared because it knew I was coming. And it's like, darn, it knew I was watching it. But for just or half a second or whatever, that one was changing because it didn't know I was watching. Oh, it's so fun when you just see that kind of stuff. Yes, this is real. This is really cool.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I know when I lived in the States with my then husband and my daughter, we had an experience with some elementals one night. And at first we thought they were fireflies because we kept seeing this little light blinking.
Oh, a light?
And we don't have fireflies in New Zealand, so they were a novelty to my daughter and I. But they weren't fireflies, and they were elementals, and they were responding when we were talking.
Oh, wow.
Like we would ask them questions, and the light would flare up, and they stayed static in the one spot. And fireflies don't; they go everywhere.
Yeah, no.
And it was much brighter than the firefly too. And even my husband, who was a little bit skeptical, he was like shocked at what was happening. Yeah, it was just a wonderful little experience because we had woods all in the back of our house.
That's neat. Yeah, I've been at some different conferences, especially I went to England. I've been there 5 times. I went 4 times to speak at various conferences, and the 4 times was especially at one specific conference. They just kept having me back every time I said I could come. Right. And then this one time I spoke, my raptor spirit guide was like right here. I had some psychics come up out of the audience, and this one guy goes, I don't really ever believe your stories. And I go, I know. He always rolls his eyes when I'm talking. And he goes, but when you started the end of your talk, all 3 of them said, we saw who was behind you. And I said, cool. And especially they saw the raptor. It is endearing to know that you have those friends with you when you're trying to speak this truth.
So you personally had connections with the elementals and with the spirit world, but not so much with the ET side of it, the star people side of it.
No, not personal connection. So I love hearing other people's stories. I believe they're real. I would love to talk to them, but I have not had a personal meeting or connection. No. Except for feeling my spirit guide, who's a raptor, standing right here. So yes, that connection. So yes, I guess I have had that connection. Have I seen them? No, but I've had the connection on a spiritual level.
Right. And there's, of course, so many more levels of reality.
And again, other dimensions, other world, they're right. It's just right there. It's just right there.
It was shown to me one time, and I've talked about this numerous times on my podcast. I was shown, like I saw myself sitting, talking to one of my favorite star people, and I saw myself sitting on a bench. And next thing, this pair of hands comes down and grabs us, and we're just a speck of dust in this little boy's hand, and he puts us in his pocket, and then it expands out to a larger view, then another one. And I said to him, why didn't I know this before? And he said, you weren't ready for this information before, but now you are. And what he was showing me basically was that this reality is like an onion, with the earth being the core of the onion and multiple layers of the onion being the different dimensions that are around this reality.
I like that. And it wasn't until I'd known my ex for years and stuff, and he was starting to talk to me about space science, but also one of my really good friends in the UFO community, she was saying, because I understand there's timelines, and I understand that many of us have had different lifetimes. But to me, in my head, that was always chronologically and linear. And it's okay, I was this, then I was this, then I was this. And it took me listening to her and then talking more with him. It's just this big ball of goo, and all the timelines are just right there. So, so here's my medieval lifetime, and here's my 2024 lifetime. And that's a fascinating way to look at it. And because why not?
Of course, time doesn't exist as we, in this reality, see time. Time's just an arbitrary, man-made measure of something that
Right.
doesn't really exist.
And if you're in space, you can fold the waves of space together if you need to get somewhere faster. It's, okay.
Yeah.
Space science is fascinating to me. And again, I've been in a castle where, okay, this ghost is just like going through me. And then in the next room, it's, I have lived in this castle before. And at that moment, I could tell, this is my medieval self. This is so cool. It was like, it was weird. And I go, okay, now it wasn't the sculptor I made. I was somebody in court, not the queen or anything like that, but I was somebody high enough so that I could be in the throne room. Okay, this is pretty cool. And for a minute, their time just melted away, and it was whatever it was, 12 or 1300s or something. So it's so cool to just have that just melt away, and you're right there.
Yeah, like timelines and timeline slips are fascinating to me. They're absolutely fascinating. And then you get into quantum physics, and then you get into
exactly.
Is this a reality that we live in, or is this a holographic reality that we live in?
That's a good question.
Yeah, there's just so much, and my mind constantly questions, and I just find this stuff endlessly fascinating, as I'm sure you do, Joanne.
What's fascinating is a couple of times I've talked to my mom and my dad. And my dad was college educated. My mom was not. And sit around talking about science. And my mom, we didn't think of her as very book smart or anything, but she was a good mom. I'm talking to my dead parents, and they're starting to talk to me about quantum stuff. It's like, what? You're into quantum stuff now that you're dead? As they just blew my mind with the fascinating things they started talking about. This is so cool because I've been learning a little bit about this, and now you're in another dimension or reality or whatever you want to call it once you've passed over. I was like, and you know about quantum stuff, and you can talk to me about it. And okay, this is a way more fascinating, Mom, than when you were alive.
Of course, here in this reality, our knowledge is deeply constrained and deeply, deliberately, people are kept in ignorance.
And it's lovely to know that even after you're gone, or even after you leave this body, you could go and keep learning about all kinds of cool stuff. Okay. Because not everybody chooses to reincarnate. There's all kinds of possibilities after you leave this earth.
Well, learning never stops.
Amazing.
Never stops.
This is so cool.
So where do you see yourself going from where you are now? Do you have any more books in you?
I do. I have started working on a book, and the working title is something about messages from the grandmothers. And I forget what the subtitle is, but okay, my family never talked about their childhood. So I hardly knew anything about my mom's life, my grandma's life, or let alone my great-grandma's life. And my great-grandma died before I turned 3. So I have a picture of her. I remember her, but I didn't know her. So I've been inspired to write through the channeling medium. I've been interviewing my mom, and I'm just doing the 4 generations on her line, her mom. So 2 great-grandmas for me. And I've talked to all of them, and I have many more interviews to do with, okay, what was your life like? How were women regarded in your lifetime? Because women's rights is a huge, important thing to me. And being able to stand up and speak as a strong woman is very important to me, especially going through the crappy marriages that I had. And I had to stand up for myself. So it's very important. And talking to grandmothers who never had the opportunity to vote. So what was life like for you? And so we haven't gotten to all the nitty gritty, but it's like, how did you show up for yourself? How did you use your voice as a woman? Yeah. And then what kind of toxic patterns and also special gifts did you pass down to me? And then what do you want the future generations to know?
Yeah, good question.
So I'm working on it. The structure's being laid out. I've had several meetings with the grandmas, and I have several more to do. It's becoming very real and very exciting, and I love talking to them, and they're so excited to share their wisdom, and then I can pass it forward to my daughter, my grandchildren, and whoever, because It's not going to be done by this election by any means, but it's just these times are important, and we need powerful leaders. We need powerful women leaders. But it's just, I'm so grateful that they're allowing me to speak for them because they have important things to say.
Oh, that's
even though some of them were just farm wives, but they
No.
still have important things to say.
And they have
So-
skills that we would never have these days. So where can my listeners, how can they reach you if they want to contact you? Are you on social media?
Yes, I'm everywhere. But yes, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn under Joanne Fawcett. I also have a website, joannefawcett.com. They can find me all kinds of places. I have emails. You can always message me through the social media, but on Joanne Fawcett, it's joanne@joannefawcett.com. Email, whatever, all the social media. I love to hear from people. I'm happy to chat, talk more about the books, all that good stuff.
For my listeners who didn't catch that, don't worry. I'll have Joanne's information on her page on our podcast website, www.walkingtheshadowlands.com. There will be links to Joanne's website and to her social media on that page. Joanne, it's been a really interesting conversation. I can tell that you've had a very interesting life.
And it's just getting better.
Oh, as it does. I think as women, as older women, we reach a stage in our life where we just don't care about others' opinions. And I think that's the wise woman phase, isn't it? You get past worrying about what other people think about you.
I love being a crone.
Yes.
It's so great.
The thing is, hasn't crone always had such a negative connotation in this past world? But really, crones used to be revered and honored for their wisdom.
Exactly. I love this phase of my life. I'm finally, it's taken me 50 years to get here and really claim my life. So I love it. Yeah.
Good for you, Joanne.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful talking to you. I've really enjoyed today. So thank you for coming on our podcast and sharing your knowing with us all. I appreciate that.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us in this enlightening conversation. A special thanks to Jo sharing her insights on the fascinating intersections of spirituality, extraterrestrials, and elementals. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and leave a review. For more intriguing discussions, check out our previous podcasts. And remember, this is the last season of Walking the Shadowlands, although we do have a few more episodes left to go before I call it a day. Until next time, this is Marianne, bidding you farewell from the Shadowlands. Thanks for listening to this episode. Ka kite.